Stephen Mansfield, New York Times bestselling author and speaker.
Doug Tenaple, I'm the creator of Earthworm Jim.
Tweet groups.
I'm Victor Dweck.
Joseph Carter, I'm the Mink Man.
This is Dave Baker from Forged in Fire.
This is Leah Morgan. I'm a comedian, and this is why you should never
Not ever.
Don't waste your time.
Oh, you really should.
listen to those darling, yummy Reverend and the Reprobate.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Reverend and the Reprobate. I'm Lucas Pinkard. I am the Reverend. Here with me is a man who was certainly drunk the day his mom got out of prison. It's David Gibson, the Reprobate.
When is it my time to be the Reverend?
I guess when you get ordained.
How long does that take?
Longer than you're willing to put into it.
Okay, then I'll stay the Reprobate.
So today on the show Expo, we have Brett and Erin Kunkle from Maven. Their website is maventruth.com, even though the organization is just known as Maven. And they've got some really interesting stuff to talk to us about teaching your kids apologetics from a young age and helping them to own their faith. There's a couple of things that really stood out to me. They talk about the conferences. They talk about the immersion experiences, which is something that both of our moms would have probably balked at whenever they heard about them initially, because it's counterintuitive to a lot of the ways that ministry has been done, but it tends to work really well.
The age would have been an important factor, right?
Oh, certainly.
How old we were.
Right.
Because I did some of that, but I was older.
Yeah, and I mean, they talked about doing it with their 9-year-old.
Yeah.
That he's been on an immersive experience.
Yeah, that would have been a flat no.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt. But they were able to do it because they've incorporated all of these other things that allows that 9-year-old to know what he believes, why he believes it. And at 9, he's able to converse with people talking about his Christian convictions, which is an incredible thing. And while you may be like, oh, well, they're super parents, they readily admit in the podcast that they have made a ton of mistakes. And yet they are developing these ideas within their children about what faith is and how they can share it with people. It was an absolutely incredible interview. I'm really excited to get to share this with a lot of folks. It's a little different than one of the or several of the ones that we've done in the past. This is taken at a deeper topic, and it's kind of hitting it head on. But Brett and Erin are great. There's a lot of laughter in it, especially whenever we get to our controlled rowdiness.
That's what I was going to say. We get into some pretty deep territory with really them just explaining some deep stuff, but we do get into some just nonsense at the end.
And I ask like a 2-minute long question that gets an answer-ish. So
I think there's like 9 questions in there, so I'll go ahead and start with number 1.
Yeah, and try to work your way through it. So if you guys enjoy lengthy questions and deep conversation
and controlled rowdiness,
you came to the right place this week
with the Kunkles.
Check it out, like and subscribe. Sweet. Well, Danley, our special guests on the show today are Brett and Erin Kunkle, who have an organization called Maven. You can find their website, maventruth.com, but they will just refer to themselves as Maven, or else they'll hang up on you, and you're not allowed to get any of the materials that they use for their apologetic study. But their big focus for what they do, and one of the reasons we were so interested in them is because as a pastor, we have youth and children who we're trying to teach not only how to own their faith, but also how to talk about it, how to defend it. You've got a 10-year-old and you're kind of having some of these same discussions. Well, that is what their entire ministry is focused on, is how parents and kids can begin to have studies or conversations about apologetics in the home. And they have a lot of things that coincide with that, one of which is the conference, but we'll let them tell us all about that stuff. Brett and Erin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good to be talking to some people in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it must be great to talk to some people in Dallas, and mask-free people in Dallas right now.
Yes, exactly. We're tired of Californians. We're moving to Texas with 50% of our state's population. So
well, awesome. That's awesome. Now,
have you narrowed down where in Texas?
Yeah.
The only city we're aware of is Dallas, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's close to the only city that's here, right? And Governor Abbott is moving right now that any transplants from California have to pass a 30-day written exam and all that stuff before they can vote. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's happening right now.
And the Babylon Bee just did one, a 30-year quarantine.
Yeah, 30-year quarantine for all Californians moving to Texas. So talk to us a little bit about Maven and how it got started, because I'm fascinated by this entire story, and I want to introduce our audience to it.
Yeah, well, Erin and I had done youth ministry for years in Southern California here. We did a little stint for 4 years in the Denver area in Colorado, and ended up coming back to Southern California to do a master's degree in philosophy at Talbot School of Theology, Biola University. And just saw a huge need as we worked with young people for years, the need to equip them with the knowledge of the truth, to know what they believe, why they believe it, and also then why it matters. What are the implications for the Christian worldview? And so at that time, I ended up starting up with an organization called Stand to Reason, which is an apologetics ministry, really trying to equip young people how to defend the faith. And after a good 14 years with Stand to Reason, and lots of great ministry, and I love those guys and what they're doing. But we just felt there was a huge need to focus on not only the young people, but also the people who are discipling the young people. And so in particular, parents and youth workers and youth pastors and pastors. And we also saw there was a huge need not only to equip that group, but also to equip them in a way that went beyond just apologetics, just defending the faith. Because a lot of the questions that young people were beginning to ask were morphing a little bit. They were changing, and they were much more worldviewish in how they challenged the Christian faith. So it wasn't so much the atheist who is, questioning the existence of God, although that challenge is out there for young people, but it was more so finding young people who couldn't square what their friends were saying about gender identity and what it means to be a male or a female, or if it does mean anything, and then their Christian faith. And so it was these worldview issues. It was the issue of casual sex or same-sex marriage, and these things just did not fit with this Christian picture that I'm getting at church. And we thought, man, we need to equip young people with apologetics, but we also have to give them a robust Christian worldview that makes sense of all of these issues, that makes sense of all of life, that brings coherence and ultimately deep, rich meaning from a biblical worldview. And so that really motivated us. And then I typically just drag Erin along on all my crazy adventures. And
I think the, all those years that Brett's describing, when we're first married and doing youth ministry, our kids are young or not born yet. We have 5 kids now, but so we experienced that church ministry side and being youth pastors and all of that. And then as he worked at Stand to Reason and is teaching on worldview and apologetics, we're having more kids and becoming parents of more kids. And now our kids are getting older and teenagers. And so we do have that perspective of raising kids in this culture and seeing how culture is changing. And when our oldest daughter, who now is 26 and out of the home and married, but when she was in elementary school, 5th, 6th grade, now she's starting to ask for a cell phone, for example. And the cell phone she's asking for was a flip phone. And there's no internet on this phone. But now, our youngest is 9. So we have a big gap between our 5 kids. They're kind of all over the place in ages. But so we've experienced a lot of change just as parents, and knowing what we have to navigate with our kids and what our parents as grandparents have had to navigate with their grandkids, and just the changes as they come so fast. And so our heart really being for youth pastors and teachers and parents and grandparents who are trying to navigate and equip and disciple their kids and their students at this time in this culture. And it's a challenge.
Yeah, that is a real uphill battle at the moment. And I did want to touch on, your daughter wanted the flip phone. I want to go back to a flip phone, but that was the most fun way to hang up on somebody that I've ever experienced. Every time I'd get with the phone, I'd flip it real quick and it would slap shut and then hang up. I kind of want to go back. Well, I know I'm derailing the conversation right now from talking about apologetics to flip phones, but they're amazing.
Well, there's a big part of the technological advancements that is causing a challenge, not just for the kids, but also in the home. And one of the things we've found difficulty in talking to people about worldview, because I didn't realize this, that's a fairly new term that's being put into vogue. And so we're talking to parents a lot about how to discuss having a Christian worldview with your kids. And they're like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what does it mean to have a worldview? I'm just talking about the way that I was raised. I talked to them about the way that I was raised and the things that they're doing and that they don't mesh, because they're being fed all this junk. Well, that's part of what is shaping a worldview. So when we talk about worldviews, what is it that you see is the biggest challenge in the home? Is it the cell phones? Is it the stuff that the kids are being taught at school? Not that we're necessarily railing against the public school systems, but there's so much of that seems like it is moving along with a sort of moralistic relativism of what they're getting in the school. So which do you think is the bigger cause of the distances being put between a Christian worldview and the worldview that our kids are having?
Well, okay, so let's define worldview. A worldview, very simply put, is your picture of reality, right? So you can think of how it functions, how it helps us to navigate life. Is it kind of creates this framework for life. And so if you oftentimes we deal with particular issues, or we deal with hot topics, or, we're asking, okay, what are the big issues that young people are facing? And so we might look at technology, or we might look at, sexuality or pornography or anxiety or whatever it might be. And we look at those different issues, but we have to step back. And this is what worldview helps us do. We need to step back and see how these particular issues are being framed by these larger questions. And, and Francis Schaeffer talked about this, where he says we often deal in kind of bits and pieces instead of totals. And that's kind of the idea with the worldview, is it gets us to step back and see a kind of a total world and life view that will make sense of the particular pieces. Because we'll get parents who will say, okay, my kid has a smartphone. How do I help them navigate this piece of technology? And it's like, well, okay, I can give you some practical steps, but if that's not the part of this larger comprehensive view, Christian worldview, that tells us not only what am I supposed to do with that thing, but what is that thing? Right? I mean, if you want to know what something is supposed to do, or what it's, the way it's supposed to function properly, you need to know what it is. You need to know where it comes from. And so that's what worldview does, and that's how it functions. And so I think we need to oftentimes step back with kids, and we always want to hit the hot issue, the relevant issue, the thing that we're facing now, or whatever's in the culture. And that's good, and we need to do that. But we always have to kind of pull ourselves out and help pull our kids out and say, okay, there's some larger considerations here. You want to deal with the question of gender identity, because that's a hot one.
Yeah.
Kids are going to school, and their ninth grade friend is transitioning. And they're like, well, I like my friend. I love my friend. I want to care about my friend. But now he wants to be a she. And this apparently doesn't fit with what my church teaches or what the Bible teaches. And now I got this clash, and how do I deal with that? And that's where we've got to help pull them out before we can really address that particular issue well. We want to pull back and say, okay, in the Christian worldview, we know some key fundamental things. Number one, there is a personal creator who has made us. That's our origin story. And that helps us to make sense then of what it means to be human, that we are made by this personal creator. We are made in his image. We are designed in a certain way to function in a certain way and to live in a certain way. And when we do that, we flourish, right? There's this whole other piece. He has issued moral commands, and he's given us meaning and purpose in life, these kinds of things. And then we can then look at these pressing issues, which I think there's a number of them.
Sure.
And they're going to differ from house to house, but definitely technology is one that we hear parents facing, talking about that one all the time, asking for help on that one all the time. So it's technology, it's front and center. I think questions of sexuality, that's a little broad, but often those questions surround gender identity, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, casual sex, will all be a piece of that. And then I think the anxiety and depression that a lot of young people are going through is an issue that is, it's an indicator of something's gone wrong with a lot of young people, a lot of their peers. This is now the norm. And so those are definitely hot issues that people are facing. And we've got to equip parents really to parent worldviewishly, if you will. And in doing so, they will help bring some meaning and coherence to things and be able to answer those questions in deeper, more significant ways that make more sense.
Yeah, I think one of the most compelling things that we talk about with kids when it comes to technology, and you look at the framework, is what you said before, is what is that device? What is it doing to enhance what you're doing, or is it doing something that brings challenges? Is it something that's divisive, or is it something that helps and builds you up by the input and the things that you're looking at? As specifically where the topic of sexuality comes in, one of the things, and I'm sure you guys are at least familiar with Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, and some of the work that Nancy Pearcey has done with Love Thy Body, is these kids are getting affirmation anytime they have a question about their sexuality. Is it too early for me to have sex? And an 11 or 12-year-old might be asking that question because now they're being exposed to porn for the first time at such a young age, and what they're seeing and now the questions that they're having are not the same ones that we had whenever at 11 or 12 our parents were like, get off the Nintendo 64, go outside and play with your friends. So how is it that you can build a foundation for a Christian worldview, especially where that one question is, from a young age? And what age do you start to build that foundation at?
Well, that's the question we get a lot too, is when do you start? Because these questions that the kids have, the ideas behind it are ideas that we can start building with them a long time before they start facing them in the culture. So when do you start teaching your kids these Christian worldviews on sexuality, our bodies? From the very beginning, and actually today I was just looking at some books that we're going to offer to parents at our conference it's just a book series, but it often offers a Christian worldview from the very start on why God made male and female. Why did God do that? Because he did do that. And he made the two genders, and then he said it was good. And so teaching our kids from the very beginning that question of what is it for? Like what is a man for? What is a woman for? The Bible speaks to that. We Christians have ideas on that. And so we start teaching our kids when they're little that there's two genders and it's very good. And thinking about technology, all those things. I mean, these are things that when our kids are young, we can start teaching them. This is a tool. Dad works on the computer. Mom and dad have phones, but we don't let these things control us. These are tools that we use to connect with people, yada, yada, but we don't let these things control us. And so even when they're little, we're modeling moderation with something like technology.
Yeah, there's kind of two things that Erin said there that I want to kind of narrate a little bit more and highlight is that notice she went back to male, female created order.
Right.
Before you get into these other, topics. And again, that's why worldview, I think, is so important, because the issue will come up. And if you haven't laid that foundation, of God's created order and God as creator and image of God and male and female, Genesis 1, well, then your kids aren't going to be equipped for those issues when they hit them in junior high or high school or even earlier, right? So you're laying a foundation at those earliest stages. In fact, I would say kind of the model, we've talked about that we kind of have this framework for our kids is really basically from by the time they start speaking till later elementary. That might be third, fourth, fifth grade, depending on, your kid's own development. But that stage is really the stage where we focus on teaching the what. And the what is our theology, right? And our theology is what gives us our Christian worldview. And so that's where we focus in the home on theology, the nature of God, the nature of Christ, the nature of the Holy Spirit, the nature of salvation, these kinds of things. And we're laying that foundation that we're going to build on. And so we talk about doctrine and theology early on, and we're laying that foundation. We're pouring that truth into our kid, and they're not going to comprehend it all. They're not going to understand it all. That's okay, because they're still going to have that material that you can keep working on. And so then in junior high or later elementary, junior high, depending on when your kid really starts questioning things, is this kind of second stage that they move into. And so you keep teaching the what, but then you make sure you add teaching the why. And this is where I think by the time a kid is in middle school, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, we have to give them a regular diet of apologetics, because we want them now to take their theology, the what, and then add the reasoning, the why behind it, seeing the evidence, learning that there are reasons independent of what mom and dad say, independent of what their pastor says, so that they can really take ownership of the faith for themselves. And so that's that second stage where you add teaching the why. And then really the third stage is high school age, where you're now trying to give them opportunities to articulate that. You're taking the what, the truth, you're putting it together with good thinking and with evidence and reasons why. And now they're learning how to articulate that in high school. And that's where things like speech and debate, or writing papers where they have to, persuasive essay where they're making an argument, or just doing role play, or getting them out of the classroom into real life. And this is one of the things that we do at Maven. We have these things called immersive experiences, where the whole goal is to do the training with young people, but then get them in situations where they now have to articulate the truth and defend the truth. And that 3-stage process, which really mirrors classical education, if your listeners are familiar with that, the kind of classical model, I think is an effective way to lay that foundation of Christian truth and get them prepared then now for when these particular unique challenges come their way. And so now when I've laid, the foundation of God, who he is, now I'm able to put that I'm able to put technology in proper perspective. And we can go back to Genesis 1 and God's, the cultural mandate to not only be fruitful and multiply, but to subdue the earth and rule over it. And technology is a tool where it reflects the image of God, right? Human beings taking God's natural resources and then making things themselves as creative beings made in his image. And so that piece of technology that human beings make isn't wrong in and of itself, but it's also not neutral. It moves us, it directs us, it nudges us, those kind of things. And so again, just trying to help narrate that, why the Christian worldview, why our Christian theology influences how we do our parenting.
Did you get this approach when you were growing up of teaching the what first, the apologetics? Because I would venture to guess, and I'm not trying to be critical of how I grew up, but there was a lot of, in the youth and kids, it was basketball and a lot of stuff like that. I don't think I got this approach to it. Do you think the church is doing a good job at the moment raising the next generation?
Erin wants to tick people off at church, so you go ahead and answer this one.
Hey, go for it. I tick people off at church every Sunday. I got an email list that you can take a look at, so we're not afraid.
Well, I think we can just look at the numbers of young people leaving the church and soberly say, we have not been training our kids the way they need to be trained to go out in the world and be disciples of Christ. It's a sobering thing for parents, all of us, the church, big C church, is we should be thinking, what have we been doing? And obviously something needs to change. just because of the massive amount of numbers of young people who are leaving the church. So,
and everyone who's listening right now knows at least, 2, 3, 4 kids who have grown up in the church. Maybe it's even their own kids who have then walked away. I mean, so we know that, the stories, the individual stories are multitude.
Yeah, I think so many stories we hear, even of people our age now who have come back to the church, is, it's just this common part of a lot of our stories of we grew up, and then when we got into high school, college, we walked away for a little while, and then, we came back. Okay, so why did that happen? And why is it keep happening? And why is it happening in larger and larger numbers now? So yes, there obviously is a problem with how we are raising our young people in the church.
Well, and I think part of the thing, we'll offer a little grace, of course, to those who raised us and discipled us. I certainly didn't get this approach. I did get some really good things. I was modeled for me in my church was, a love, and a commitment and a faithfulness to Jesus. But in terms of the intellectual side, which is absolutely vital, right? I mean, Jesus in Matthew 22 gives us the great commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And so our mind plays this vital role in our love for God. And that was just, I think it's safe to say that in churches across the U.S., the general tendency is to be anti-intellectual and not to emphasize the intellectual side of our faith, which is crazy, because if you read the New Testament talks over and over again about the knowledge of God. In fact, the New Testament talks more about knowledge than it does about faith. Christianity is a knowledge tradition, and we have knowledge of the truth that we pass on. And so, no, we have a lot of work to do. And, back then, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it, you can understand maybe people felt like there was some cultural things in place or institutions or kind of an ethos that helped reinforce maybe some leftover kind of Christian influences. And so there wasn't maybe as much thought given when the pressure's not on, but now the cultural pressure is on. And I think the good thing about that is it's waking parents up, and parents are realizing, and grandparents are realizing, and pastors are realizing that it's not enough. What we've done in the past is not enough. The secular culture is so aggressive. And so we've got to rethink our discipleship of young people and then redouble our efforts.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the people in our church, and really in the church at large, as we've talk about the different associations and stuff that we belong to, parents and grandparents are all coming back to this thing. And for a long time, there was this thought, especially among my parents' generation, the Gen Xers, like, we don't want to impose our beliefs onto our kids, because we want them to be able to do their own thing. We want them to think for themselves and do things for themselves and all that, and we don't want to force our belief system onto them. But what that's left is generations of unequipped Christians who are now going out into the world. When you talk about, I want to get to the immersion experiences in just a second, because these are completely fascinating to me. But in particular, when we talk about a Christian worldview, and you hit on it a little bit, that our faith in general has become less intellectual as people are now looking more at, do you think God makes you feel good, and a worship experience that are emotionally driven. How is it?
How many gold stars did Jesus give you?
Yeah, exactly. What is it that we can do to identify whether or not we're setting a good theological foundation for that worldview, and where are some of the pitfalls that we might fall into as parents or as leaders, as not nurturing the intellectual side? Because Paul, you alluded to this a lot when you were talking about the knowledge base. Paul was obviously a brilliant guy. His arguments are very much laid out almost like a defense attorney. So why is it, and how is it, that we can move from a place where we are feeling oriented to intellectual oriented, and making sure that we're doing it with sound theology? Because it looks like right now, even in the Christian realm, there's two competing worldviews when it comes to theological fundamentals.
Yeah, I'll just say, I know Brett's going to have a lot to say on that. I think I'll just just about what you said about parents saying they don't want to push their beliefs on their kids. That to me is maybe where parents need to sit back and reflect on, are these beliefs that you really have? And do you think Christianity is true? Because if Christianity is true, if the Christian worldview is the true way to look at the world, if the God of the Bible is the God of creation, why on earth would you not want to tell your children about that?
That's a great point.
If you don't think it's true, then you may want to do some investigating and find some answers to some obvious, gaps in your beliefs, in what you think is true. So then you can pass it on, because we can't pass on what we don't have. So if you don't really believe Christianity is true, you're not going to pass that on to your kids anyway. So, I mean, to me, it just seems like I know that the God of the Bible is real. I know that the Bible teaches truth. And so I am desperate to have my children know that truth too. And so it seems to me, maybe as parents, if we are even wrestling with that question, that we have to do some unpacking of our own beliefs. And that is probably where you would first start.
Yeah. And I think, these are such foundational issues that expose us. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of imposing my views on kids, well, here would be some questions for parents who think this way. Like, well, do you impose your views about medicine on your kids? Like, if you have views that, particular medicines work for their sicknesses, do you impose that on them?
Essential
do you impose
oils.
Your views about education on them? Are these kind of things like they got to go to school? Are you imposing that on them? And, they need to study and those kind of things. And what it does is it ends up revealing, then we take this different approach. Well, I don't want to enforce my religious beliefs on them. And it betrays the fact that many of us don't have this strong view that Christianity is actually true, that it's objectively true. And this is why it's important to realize that Christianity is a knowledge tradition. It gives us knowledge of reality. The Bible gives us knowledge of reality. It doesn't just give us personal beliefs that make us feel good. It's not, but the American approach is to relativize, religion, subjectivize it. It's kind of, it turns out to be this personal hobby that you have. Mm. And so if I have a personal hobby, I'm not going to impose those personal hobbies or personal preferences on someone else, And so if this is, someone's view in the church, you've got to sit back and go, wait a second, I need to rethink even how I think about the Christian faith. And we as church leaders have got to speak in terms of the truthfulness, the objective truthfulness, that this stuff is true, whether you believe it or not. Jesus rose bodily from the grave 2,000 years ago, whether you believe that or not. And so then to teach that is not imposing, because there's no way I can force my kid to believe what I believe, but I'm certainly going to teach what I take to be true and try to persuade them to eventually take ownership of those views themselves. Because just like if my kid had cancer, I try to persuade them to take chemotherapy, drugs, and, do radiation to, save their life. In the same way, I'm going to do all that I can to help persuade my kid that, salvation is found in no one else but the risen Jesus, and that was going to save their eternal life, So I don't know if we answered all of your questions. You had a couple questions there, but
I got a little long-winded. I was train of thought happens. Asking a question. Yeah, that was a 2-minute long question that incorporated 7 different questions. But no, I think you did wrap it up really nicely in talking specifically about getting the parents to realize what they do and don't impose on people. And I made a joke in the middle of it, essential oils, but Like that, every mom I know has her doTERRA kit that she carries around with her, and if her kid starts to sneeze, she puts like thieves under their nose and 2 drops of lemon oil in their ear, and they're like, "You're going to be fine, but your nose is going to be running for the rest of the day. Stay away from the other children." And we don't mind doing that. And I think even with, you touched on hobbies, like we talk to people about what our hobbies are, even though we don't impose that necessarily on them.
I impose my hobbies on others.
Yeah, you do. You're horrible. But all of those things are things that we readily and freely talk about, and we have joy whenever we talk about. But when it comes to our faith, somehow we've gotten this idea that we're supposed to shy away, and that our faith is supposed to be something that we keep to ourselves. You know, we talked with David Baker several months ago, and he was talking about gentlemanly and polite conversation, and some of the things that are involved in that is you don't talk about money, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about politics. Well, the Bible flies in the face of all of those things. It says our religion and our faith should inform our politics, and also how we steward our money and those kind of things. So you mentioned earlier, we'll hop topics here for just a second. You mentioned earlier that you do immersion experiences. And we know a friend of yours from the Holy Smokes Club here in the DFW area. What do these immersive experiences consist of, and what is that like, and what was the impetus behind it?
Yeah, the impetus was going on a trip like this myself. So when I was a college student at Biola University, a friend of mine talked me into going on this spring break mission trip to Utah. I'm thinking, like, why are we going to Utah? Aren't we supposed to go to the Dominican Republic or Mexico or, some, other nation?
Ideally, Florida.
Or Texas. And so we went on this trip, but the training that we were doing before the trip was unlike any training I had ever been to. So we go to this training night, and the first night is this rich theological discussion and biblical defense of the Trinity. And I had never gotten that growing up in church, in my youth group, in my home. And it's the first time I'm hearing a rational explanation of the Trinity, showing how Scripture teaches this. I'm like, what is this? So I go back to the next training, and we're going deep into the doctrine of salvation. And on and on and on. And then I go to Utah, and we basically put ourselves in situations where we had to share the truth and share the gospel with Mormons. And I grew leaps and bounds on that trip. It had such a huge impact on me. So then when Erin and I were doing youth ministry, I just thought, this is one of the most life-transforming trips I've had. Well, we've got to take our youth on these kind of things. And so we, when we were out in Colorado, we started taking our high school and college students on an annual summer mission trip to Utah, and did the same kind of training, and then put them in situations where, we go to Utah and they'd have to talk to Mormons. And so we'd go to Salt Lake City and go to the temple. We'd go down to BYU and talk to college students there. We'd go door to door around BYU.
Oh, wow.
And just all these ways to put them in situations to talk to unbelievers. And then started doing that when I was with Stand to Reason. And that trip focuses on really knowing the Scriptures and knowing our theology, knowing what we believe. But then we realized, we need the same kind of trip, because this mode of teaching is just unlike anything else. It just, students grow so much, and they're so motivated as well. So then we said, we want to figure out how to teach some apologetics and logic and good philosophy to kids, help them learn how to defend the faith. So, I don't know, let's go to the craziest place we can think of. And a friend of mine recommended Berkeley. So we're like, let's go to Berkeley, California.
That'd do it.
Yeah, it may be a little bit different than where you guys are from.
Not too terribly much. We live just south of a pretty intense liberal arts school, and we've got enough friends in Austin that we get inundated with a lot of the philosophical stuff that's out on the West Coast and that they're teaching at those colleges. So.
Yeah, we're gonna build a wall around Austin. That'll be fun.
Well, we've actually talked about doing one of these immersive apologetic experiences to, somewhere in the South more, and doing it maybe Austin, because Austin has its reputation.
Oh yeah.
And Berkeley has its reputation. And so there's no shortage of kind of secularists, skeptics, atheists. And so we started doing those immersive experiences and just inviting atheists out to challenge our kids on some particular issue of their faith and letting them dialogue with those atheists. And frankly, sometimes letting these students get kind of ripped apart and, to help them see that they don't, even if they grew up in the church, most of them don't know much about what they believe. And you can tell them that. You can say, I don't think you know as much as you think you know. And it's not until they get exposed by a Mormon or an atheist or a skeptical college student that then it wakes them up. And so these students just wake up on these trips and then they get motivated. And we've seen kids go back, and late at night study their books and their theology books and their apologetics books because they know we're going out the next day to do the same thing. And so that we have, when we started Maven, we have the apologetics trip, we have the biblical trip to Utah, and then we added a third one, a worldview trip, which is not so much interacting with unbelievers as it is figuring out how our theology should shape how we view every single area of life, including things like business and economics, politics, public policy, government, the arts and entertainment. And so that's our third immersive experience. And Erin and I have taken all of our kids on these trips as well.
Yeah, and the trips really, what we talked about earlier, the what, the why, and then kind of the how to, the talking through. The trips bring all of that together. And so even thinking back to the parent who says, well, I don't want to just teach my kid what to believe. I want to let them believe. Well, we need to teach them the what because it's true, but we shouldn't just leave our kids there. We have to teach them the why. We have to teach them not just what to think, but how to think. And then why it matters. And these trips bring all of that together. We teach them the what and we teach them the why, and then we take them out and they interact with people who don't think what we think, and they're looking in the eyes of fellow human beings and they're realizing why this matters because it affects how we live our lives, the decisions we make. It affects everything. And so it's like no camp we ever took our youth group to. It's like no trip we've ever been on with our kids. This just, it just brings it all together, the heart and the mind. And
yeah, well, that's a great point because, it's not like we're going up to Berkeley and we just want to own the atheists, kind of approach.
The Ben Shapiro approach.
Yeah, you just fill your cups full of atheist tears.
Yeah. When we make sure the atheists are out of their cages when they engage.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Smart move.
But what happens is they will see this atheist guy, David, who I've developed a relationship with now over the last 15 years. First thing he does when he walks in the room is he gives me a big hug. You can just see the kids like horrified looks like, oh my gosh, you can hug an atheist, And,
Kunkle's going to hell now.
Afterwards we have this intense conversation. He's a passionate guy and he'll go at me and I'll go at him and we're defending our views and we're having this intense dialogue, but we're civil to each other. And then afterwards he hugs me and, says good luck and, see you later. And then we sit down with the kids and we do a debrief. But that debrief isn't just going through the argumentation. Then it's saying, okay, how are you feeling about Dave during that time where he's kind of
that's a great question.
Faith?
Yeah.
Were you getting angry, or did you view him as somebody who bears the image of God? And whether he's an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Muslim, he's a valuable human being. And you know what? God cares about his soul and his life more than we even do. And so let's just close and spend time just praying for Dave's salvation, And so we really make sure we bring head and heart together, just like Scripture does. And I think, so not only do young people on these trips really get grounded in the faith and able to defend it and all that good stuff and just grow in their own confidence that this stuff is true. But then the other thing that it does is it gives them a taste of the mission of the church.
Yeah.
Right. Matthew 28. And most kids who come on these trips say, they tell us, like, I've never shared the gospel with anybody. And so they've been sitting on the sidelines. And so we're like, all right, we're throwing you in the game. We're getting you off the sideline. You're a starter now. Jump in here. And they'll share the gospel for the first time, and they get lit up.
Oh,
and, it's fun to watch.
It's fun to watch these kids get lit up the first time they share the gospel. But I'm sure that works on a couple of different levels, where if the kid goes out and completely fails, then it's easy to tell them, great job, encourage them and that kind of stuff. But also the first time that you share the gospel with somebody, there is a sense of accomplishment, whether you did a great job or you bombed, that you did what you were supposed to do. And that's a pretty incredible thing. What was the response from parents the first time that you decided to take somebody on one of these, to take their students on this immersive trip? Like, hey, we're going to go to a Buddhist temple. And I know the youth group that I grew up in, even though the moms were very sweet, they would have been like, not a chance. Not my kids are going to get, they're going to touch a Buddha, they're going to stop eating pork, and they're all going to shave their heads. My kids are not going to a Buddhist temple. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, our rate of conversions to these other religions is probably 25% of the groups that we take.
Oh, that's pretty solid.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Hey, 74% of students right now believe in moralistic relativism. So this is pretty good. We're at least saving 25% of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's collateral damage, right?
Yeah, that happens.
Okay. On a more serious note to your question, it's a really good question. And this, I think, reveals as what parents, we do have to shift. Like, we have got to shift in how we're thinking about training our kids. And yes, us moms, sometimes we can be overprotective and not want our kids to struggle. And if you're listening now and you feel that way, I totally empathize with you, but we have got to let our kids struggle. And that includes struggling with their theology and their ideas and their worldview. And so what better situation than to send your student with their youth pastor, or go with them yourselves and go visit the Mormon temple, the Buddhist temple, expose them to these views, and then talk with them through the holes in the view, or what Christianity says about things and which one makes more sense. And we've got to do that. But to answer your question, yes, we have gotten pushback from parents a lot because they're scared. And as parents, Brett and I get it. Our worst fears as Christian parents is that our kids would walk away. And so we get it, but we have got to push through that fear and train our kids and help equip them. Don't just drop them off at the Buddhist temple. That's not what we're suggesting. We're not saying drop them off at Berkeley, but actually, isn't that what we've been doing? Haven't we just been sending our kids off to college campuses?
Point.
Completely. And yeah, on high school campuses.
Junior
Let's
high
be
campuses.
honest. Yeah.
Yeah, Buddhist temple might be a more safe place.
Completely unequipped for what they're going to get. So why don't we stop doing that and instead equip them and go with them and send them out eventually as adults without feeling like, oh, wow, I've never heard these challenges to Christianity before. Instead, the students who go on this trip, we hear back from them over and over again of classes they had and professors that they heard from, and they'll write and say, oh yeah, we heard this from a professor, and we were like, we've already heard that before. And just the difference in a student's life, feeling like I know this objection and I know how to think about this objection. It's life-changing.
So what I'm hearing is I need to send each one of my college graduates with a lotus flower and a jade doll to college so that I think that's a great point. I never thought about it that way, that we're essentially doing that anyway if we're not equipping the students to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
what's a better strategy? Sending my kid off to whatever, the college campus or the high school campus, on their own, away from me, being challenged all day long when I'm not there to walk them through it? Or is it better to say, okay, I'm going to let you face those challenges that you are inevitably going to face anyway if you go out into this world at all. And I'm going to be there by your side, walking you through that, guiding you through that, helping you to navigate that, so they're going to get the challenges anyway. It's when do you want them to have that in a situation where we can then equip them and walk them through that and give them the truth. And, so look, if your kid struggles with, some of these things on the trip, well, guess what? They were going to struggle anyway. It's just better that they struggle right there in front of us so that we can then help them.
So you guys are advocating against overprotecting kids to going into the lion's den with them and teaching them how to fight lions.
Yes.
Does that sum it up?
Yeah.
In dumb people words like I speak?
Brett's got a great analogy about surfing that I absolutely loved. I've heard him share it a couple of times. And if you wouldn't mind, if I can just prompt that, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with our audience, because I think that it's incredibly well done, even though you scarred your oldest daughter.
Yeah. The analogy you're referring to is in this really great book called A Practical Guide to Culture, $13.99 on Amazon.
Links are in the show notes.
So
is the author really handsome?
Well, one of them. It's co-authored volume.
One of
them
them's
is
handsome.
very handsome, very intelligent. Wrote most of it, and the other guy kind of was along for the ride. So
well, good for him. It's always nice to bring a buddy.
Yeah, but John Stonestreet, the president of the Colson Center, and I co-wrote this book of really how do we help our kids navigate culture. And the illustration that I use with my kids and the approach I use with my kids to helping them, kind of swim out into the culture is this analogy of the ocean. And living in Southern California, I grew up at the beach. I started surfing when I was in, junior high and high school, and surfed through college. And when Erin and I got married, I just thought, it'd be amazing one day to teach my kids how to surf. Namely because I would feel guilty when I'd leave Erin with the kids, and I'd go surf. So I'm like, well, okay, let's get the kids surfing too. And this can be a family thing. And I thought, okay, I didn't really think through what's the process, what's the careful process I should take to really effectively teach my kid how to surf. Because if you've been in the ocean, you can get wrecked, by the waves, or you can get caught in currents, and people drowned out there. So, my oldest daughter was kind of like, let's go out, and I took her out, and she'd get knocked around. I remember the last time she was out surfing with me, she went over the falls, as we say, and, board and limbs everywhere, and scared her to death. And she was in tears crying, and she went in and never to, surf with me again. So I thought, I got to redo this. And I thought, well, I can't overprotect my kids, right, when it comes to the water, because if I keep them out of the water, if I never take them in, if they don't learn how to swim, well, they're never going to be able to surf. But I can't overexpose them either, because if I take them in too early, like my oldest daughter, they're scarred and they never want to go back in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And so there's got to be this careful process where I'm teaching them the basics. They're gaining the knowledge they need about the ocean. There's all these things you need to know about the ocean, about currents, about the different bottoms of an ocean and how that changes the wave and all of that. You need to know about your equipment, your surfboards, your wetsuits. And then I would give them, experience, but first in the shallow part, and then on my back when they're little ones, and then with me on a surfboard, and then eventually, on their own surfboard, but me next to them. And then eventually paddling out all by themselves. And when you do that training carefully and you don't overprotect, but then you're careful not to let them get smashed, well, then your kids learn how to surf. They learn how to navigate the ocean. And in the same way, that's what we got to do with our kids in the culture. The culture is this churning ocean. And hey, look, all of the ocean isn't, these crazy waves or bad rip currents. There's some beautiful, mellow places, just like in human cultures. There's some wonderful things about human culture. But then there are some undercurrents. There are some waves that'll smash them. And so we have got to do that careful equipping so that our long-term goal is to ultimately send them into the world on their own to be faithful followers of Christ and to proclaim, his good news.
Well, does your eldest surf now still?
No, my oldest daughter doesn't. She doesn't surf.
She
actually
never
moves
took it back up.
inland.
Oh,
So
yeah.
she's in one of those states that there's not even an ocean.
So she got as
surrounding
far
it,
away
so-
as possible from the ocean.
Yeah, well, we're both oldest
Really messed
kids.
her up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're both oldest children, so we know that we're essentially our parents' experiments.
Exactly.
And that, by the
She's a
time,
big pig.
by the time they get to the end, they're either like really great at parenting, or they've seen how bad the ones in between were, and they've just given up. So one of
And
those two has happened.
And they need lots of therapy.
Yeah, for sure.
But my son, who's 19, he surfs. My daughter, who's 18, she surfs. Daughter, who's 13, she's learning. My 9-year-old is learning. And so we're doing it right with these last 4.
That's the way to do it, right? Fix it by the time you get to the second kid.
Yeah.
My parents didn't learn that. I'm the oldest of 4, and the last one is broken, and the middle 2 are okay. So, but everybody's got work that they have to do and regrets they have to live with. I love you, Mom. She doesn't listen, so it doesn't matter.
Let's get into the Maven conference, which is coming. It really, it's the end of this month.
Yeah, at the end of February, the Maven conference is coming up. You guys are going to do an in-person and an online, correct?
Well, hopefully.
So, yeah. So talk
this
to
is
us
in
about this.
person.
Yeah,
For sure.
tell us about the Maven Truth Conference.
Oh, there we go. Hang up.
Would you hang up?
Canceled.
The Maven Conference. I said it right.
Yeah, the Maven Conference is our annual conference. This is our 3rd year. It's in Southern California every year. The ultimate goal is to actually take it to other parts of the country. But the target audience is those people who are discipling young people. And this is parents, this is grandparents, this is Christian school teachers, this is educators, pastors, youth workers, Sunday school teachers, the whole thing. Because I think most parents feel overwhelmed and inadequate to sufficiently disciple their own kids, and they need help. And thank God, that's part of God's plan. Mm-hmm. The church is, God's plan A to equip us along with our families to engage this culture. So that's what we're targeting in terms of the folks that we want there, the people who are discipling the next generation. And we do a different theme each year. This year's theme is answering kids' tough questions. Ooh. So we're dealing with stuff like evil and suffering. We're dealing with gender identity. We're dealing with sexuality. We're dealing with progressive Christianity and the views of progressive Christianity, how it warps the gospel. We're dealing with the question of, is Christianity anti-science? And that's happening February 26th and 27th in Southern California, live and in person. And we are currently working on the live stream option. And so I think we're there. We're probably 85% there to make that happen. And when we do, we will announce that. If people want to jump on our email list and go to our website, maventruth.com, just sign up at the bottom of the homepage there, and we'll keep you updated on that.
Yeah, and if you can't get the live stream for some reason, you can always go to maventruth.com and get last year's conference, and then just pretend that it's this year's conference. You can just be your behind. Because last year you guys covered technology, right?
Yeah, it was navigating screens with our kids. So it was all about all the issues we talked about with technology, which is just, as you know, just one of the biggest issues we deal with as parents and disciplers of kids.
Yeah.
And let me just say this, we're really picky about the people we have come in and speak. Mm-hmm. And because there's a lot of smart men and women out there who know a lot more than we do. And yet they just can't communicate well, or they'll communicate these things in ways that just bore you to death. Mm-hmm. And then people are tempted to think this is not real relevant. And so we make sure that we have people who know their stuff, who can talk intelligently about the issues and are good thinkers, but also who are good communicators and who can help us walk through some of the practical stuff. And so we bring those folks in. And so we've got an incredible lineup this year for this year's conference.
Well, I'm really excited about it. We're going to see if we can get some of the simulcast stuff going on at our church, because we've got a large group of teachers here for the junior high and high school that go to our church, as well as a good group of people that are working with their own kids that need to learn and to do some of this stuff. So I'm excited. And if not, then nobody on my staff has seen last year's, and I loved it. So I'm just going to re-show it. And then this year's, I'm sure will be available at some point. And I'd like having it just as a resource, because with having last year's conference, I can go back and reference it and talk about some of the same things that we discussed today. Man, thank you guys so much for for coming on. We have
having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us on your show. We appreciate
Thanks
it.
for being on our podcast.
It's
guys.
great.
We appreciate it.
It's great. We're much less handsome than y'all are, but we do appreciate you guys having us on. We've got a quick, a few questions. We call it controlled rowdiness. This is something we got from a friend of ours named Stephen Mansfield. So we've got some questions. Some of them are either or. They're just rapid fire that we want to ask you guys, and then we'll have one more thing to get to you before we know you guys have a lot going on this afternoon. So we want to make sure we respect your time, Danley.
Oh yeah, it's afternoon there.
It is afternoon there, yeah,
Pacific.
because they're in the wonderful state of California.
All right,
go ahead.
Here we go. Controlled rowdiness. So you guys ready?
Are we in a question? Are we
Yes.
both supposed to answer our own?
So
I think they should have buzzers.
Yeah. Go get a button. No, you don't have to. So some of these are directed at a particular one of you, but for the first one, this one's for Brett. So it's public knowledge that the Kunkles are stunning and brave. So which one of you is which?
Erin is clearly the stunning one, and that was that first attraction. Stunning, and I'm the brave one. I'm the one out front leading our family with my bravery.
That's pretty good, but that was wrong. The answer is Erin is both.
Yep, that was very close though. That was very close.
I didn't realize there were wrong answers here.
Well, yeah. I mean, we
wrote these, so
yeah, and this podcast is founded in truth, so we want to lead you properly down the right path.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, dog or cat? But there's a catch. The dog is Cerberus. The cat is a tiger, and you are Joe Exotic.
Go ahead.
If I'm Joe Exotic, it's the tiger.
That's correct. Well done.
I can't believe you watched that show.
How sinful. My goodness.
Oh, okay, Erin, you get to break one thing of your kids. What is it?
Oh my gosh.
That's easy.
Their phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, that makes sense.
How much easier would my life be if I didn't have to,
navigate smartphones.
help navigate smartphones with my teenagers?
I regret my son is 11. He has a smartphone, and I regret getting it because we got it so he could go to school, and with the pandemic, we're paying for him to
be at home,
FaceTime his friends on Wi-Fi, essentially. But
no, we think it's actually, if you give your kid a smartphone before the age of 15, that's probably a sin.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I regret it.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
So bad parenting to Danley minus
How
one.
about a flip phone? We talked about that earlier. Is that a sin? Or just like an infraction?
No, flip. I wish we could go back to flip.
Me too.
Those were just simpler times, weren't they? Like, let's be honest.
Maybe it's just a venial sin.
It was just calling and occasional text.
And also Snake is one of the most fun smartphone games ever.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I miss my Nokia. So you guys have 5 kids. Brett, when did you realize what caused that?
Yeah.
Weird.
I think it was after the fourth one.
After the fourth one? Yeah. Just give it one more shot just to make sure.
Kept showing up.
And that's it. My wife is planning on 4 for us because we're both the oldest of 4. And this was like, we've got several friends who have, one of my best friends growing up, he's got 6 kids. And this is the question that he consistently gets is like, do you know what caused it? And he's like, yeah, we're starting to get pretty good at it. By the 7th, we think we're going to have this figured out. So I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, you got to ask him about the kids.
Yeah. Truth be told, he would have even more if I didn't have to go through all the pregnancy. The pregnancy was hard for me, which is why sometimes we have some gaps between our kids. But this guy would have had more kids.
It wasn't that hard.
Right.
Okay, Brett, what's something that you love but Erin hates?
Oh, I know, easy.
Oh, really? Easy. I don't know. I was thinking, well, it's not cigars. It's not a glass of wine.
I know. It's movies that are like really what are
intense.
the movies? Yes,
Like
intense.
violent movies or
not they don't necessarily have to be violent, but if whether just some kind of intense movie where you just kind of draws you in, you're emotionally sucked in. Oftentimes there is some tragic loss, like a Braveheart or something.
Yeah, or suspense, like a lot of suspense. Like he loves those movies, and I hate when a movie ends and I feel exhausted. And he's like, that was awesome, and I'm like, I hated that, and now I'm tired.
What movie has made you the most tired? This is just a follow-up. I didn't write this ahead of time.
Well, okay, he mentioned Braveheart, so I think of that one because he's watched it so many times. But Braveheart is just, I mean, I know it's a wonderful story, but it's just so sad and tragic. And like Last of the Mohicans and
those are all amazing movies.
Gladiator. Yeah. I mean, and like Tombstone.
Oh, that's a top 5 for sure.
Yeah, you're 4 for 4 amazing movies.
And Tombstone doesn't exhaust me the way like a Braveheart does. I can't do Braveheart anymore. I don't want to do it ever again. It's just so upsetting to me. But so that's an easy one. He loves those, and I hate them.
All of those movies make me want to just go to battle whenever I'm done with them.
I want to go watch those movies now.
Yes.
Okay, while we're on the topic, for Erin, what Rick Moranis movie is best? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or Spaceballs?
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Wrong, it's Ghostbusters.
Oh, so close. So close. And and the last question is...
I forgot he was in Ghostbusters.
Yeah, the last question is for Brett. You get to play any hero from history. Why is it William Wallace?
I'm ready to give my life for something. I'll die for something, some greater cause than me.
And it's blue face paint?
Yeah. And it has to be blue face paint.
And a kilt?
Because I was going to try the impression, but I just can't do it right now. I'm not going to butcher a Scottish accent with all the friends that I have over there.
Yeah, what's the right answer to that question?
That's open-ended.
Why is it Braveheart?
Yeah, that was an essay question.
Because of his sword.
Yeah, that's a good. I got to go see that.
It's like a 7-foot sword or something, right?
It's really big, and there's way too many stairs to get all the way up to it.
Yeah.
I brought my emergency inhaler, and halfway up, I didn't think I was going to make it. It's terrible at the top of the William Wallace Monument. Thank you guys for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Uncle's Kunkle. Actually, I don't. They had joked on another podcast that Brett gets called Uncle Kunkle quite a bit, and he was like, "No."
I mean, that's low-hanging fruit.
It really is.
I struggled. I tried to write some jokes, and I even sent you some of them, and I was just like, I can't. I'm not smart enough to make jokes about Kunkle. But like, it's a great name.
Yes.
And I feel like there are so many jokes that you could do, but it's just Uncle.
Well, yeah, and there's two words
and
that
Kunkle.
rhyme. There's two words that rhyme with uncle or with Kunkle, and that is uncle and orange, and that's it. So when you have to start there, it makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
Man, there's so much there to unpack.
They are so cool too,
and way smart.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I first noticed was the intellectual level at which they're able to talk about things, but bringing it down to terminology that we can use every day with our students, with our kids, and even they were talking about teaching apologetics to their 3-year-olds. And the ways to do that is just like set foundational things, ask the right questions or talk to them about the right things, and talking about created order and gender from the very beginning with things like God created you. He created you as a boy or he created you as a girl because that's what he wanted you to be. And he has a design for you as that, and really instilling those kind of things in the children, so that as they grow up and they're faced with different questions, that they have this foundation of who they are that's based in their created identity from God. And it seems like such a simple thing that we have completely overcomplicated now.
Yeah.
We're like, how do I talk to my kids about God? And then I just talk to them. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's the secular worldview has so many dangerous ideas, and yeah, okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. I started going into like some progressive thought is good. It moves us forward, but we need to be rooted scripturally.
Absolutely.
And you know, I asked the question of do you think the church has done a good job? I think on the most part we're struggling.
Yeah.
To disciple our children, which is going to be the next generation, and I really like their ideas because you're right, and we've overcomplicated it so much. You know, I've already from this one conversation, I've got a whole bunch of things I want to try with my son.
Yeah, and
it's mainly just talking to him.
Yeah, and that's what's so crazy about it is that we have stopped having these conversations, right? Because they're right in the sense that we just need to start talking about it again. You know, there's a lot of books and a lot of seminars and things like that for children's groups and for youth groups that tell you you've got to be kind of fun and yucks. You know, you've got to be event driven, and that if your youth group does really cool events, then your youth group is going to grow. Well, what the Kunkles have found out and what Costi Hen has found out, and several others just have seen this explosion in discipleship and making, you know, the Christian worldview, the worldview in the lives of a lot of students is going back to basic theology and doctrine and teaching kids that because they're looking for truth. Mm-hmm. Throughout the day when they're on their phones, when they're at school, they're being inundated with what all of these other people are saying. Well, this is true, or this is true, or you get to decide your own truth. But when you look at things within a biblical framework and you say, no, this is what God says is true, and you can see this throughout the created order of things from a scientific perspective, but also relationally, you can see it that way spiritually. You can see it in the way that we physically interact with our world and the way that we physically interact with each other. And if you can show that to a student, well, now all of a sudden their view changes, or like a light bulb is going off. And what that is, it's the work of the Holy Spirit in their lives as God is showing them, like, yes, this is the created order of things. I did this. I put you in this world this way, that I designed you so that you could, you know, serve and be a part of this and work with the people around you, love the people that you're with, and all of those great things that we want to instill in kids. Well, those are all based in a biblical framework and worldview, and we're seeing this explosion in youth ministries where that's what's being taught. It's not about, you know, playing a basketball game or having a ping pong table in the middle of the room, or you know, whether or not we're going to have a great big food fight on Friday night and everybody needs to invite your friends and like and share it on Facebook and all that. Like, those were the things that happened when we were in youth ministry, and a lot of youth ministers, that's what we were taught to do. But when we look at what's working, it's the same thing that's been working from when Jesus gave the Great Commission to the apostles. Go and preach the gospel, teach them about everything that Jesus commanded, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, love each other, and just see what happens. And God will do amazing things when we just are obedient to Him instead of trying to take all these extra things and add them onto it. It's nuts. Yeah. Just, you know, do what you're told.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Boom.
Well, Kunkle's fantastic.
Thank you guys for listening. Make sure that you like, subscribe, ding the little bell so that you get notifications when new videos come out. Thanks to Brett and Erin Kunkle. Check them out at MavenTruth.com. They've got the conference that's coming up by the end of February. You can see all of their links to their books, their Facebook and Twitter accounts, and all that stuff is going to be down here in the show notes. Thank you guys for joining us once again, and for Danley Gibson and Lucas Pinker.
The Danley Gibson Show.
I've been the Reverend and the Reprobate. No, I thank you guys for watching and checking us out. We'll see you all next week.
Yeah. This is Brett Kunkle of Maven.
And this is Erin Kunkle of Maven.
And you should not listen to the Reverend and Reprobate Show, because these guys are actually currently in the process of transitioning. They are both struggling with their gender identity, and the transition, I think, has created a lot of confusion in them. And they should probably both be wearing skirts right now. And I would not recommend their show to anyone.
Yeah, call us fat too.
That was awesome.